Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about the trolley dilemma. It is considered the foundation of many ethical principles, but it's actually not even philosophy at all. It's just rational thought experimentation outside of the context of reality, which can't be rational or ethical or practical because the rational is the moral and the moral is the practical because both the practical and the moral are the rational. It would be a contradiction if this was not true. And contradictions cannot exist because A is A. So therefore, the short-term rational thought experiment cannot have anything to do with ethics because it is outside the context of reality. So let's just look at the classical trolley dilemma here. So here we have the classical trolley dilemma with Mickey Mouse interposed onto the trolley because why not? We're not talking about reality anyway. I'm sure you all are familiar with this, but the classical dilemma is the trolley is going down the tracks and it will kill 5 people, but you can switch the lever and it'll switch tracks and it'll kill 1 person. What do you do? And most people say they would switch it, but then some people say they wouldn't because if they do nothing, they're not responsible for anything. But if they do switch it, then they're responsible for 1 death. And this is a big moral dilemma. Of course, it is not a moral dilemma because it doesn't exist. These sort of rational thought experiments do not exist. You can always add more and more dimensions to it. Another way of viewing the trolley problem is essentially the same thing in principle, but a little bit different in action. So the trolley is going down the tracks and there are 5 people that will die, but there's a fat man standing on the bridge over the tracks with you and you can push him off, stopping the trolley and killing 1 person. And people would say that it's essentially the same thing because you're choosing to kill 1 person versus the 5 if you do nothing. But then some argue that this is different because you have to push the man onto the tracks, which is somehow fundamentally different. And then people bring about doubts as to if the man would actually stop the trolley and whatever. But then it's bringing in realistic doubts that might happen in a completely unrealistic situation. It has nothing to do with ethics. So I talked to ChatGPT about a trolley problem here and just seeing, because we can invent so many things, right? You can say, okay, 5 people are going to die, but if you pull the switch, 5 people will still die, but there will also be fireworks that go off while you do it. Or there are 2 people on the track, and if you pull the switch, it'll kill a different 2 people. Do you do it? And then this gives you some power, and is that moral? Or again, it's just some rationalist thought experiment. And the problem with rationalist thought experiments is you can always add more dimensions to it that are completely outside the context of reality. They cannot have anything to do with reality. And since morality is about reality, it is always about the context. This is outside the context and can be nothing other than just a thought experiment and have nothing to do with morality, let alone reality. So this was my little addition here, which I asked ChatGPT to reason about. So my version is that if you do nothing, 5 people die. If you flip the switch, the trolley will blast All I Want for Christmas Is You by Mariah Carey, and the same 5 people will die. What do you do? Well, in this whimsical version, I'd probably flip the switch and let Mariah Carey's song play. It might not save lives, but at least it adds a festive twist to the situation. Well, I mean, this is as good of moral reasoning, if you count this as moral reasoning in this thing, as, ChatGPT just talks about, well, you might as well make it happy. Well, I could give you this problem. And if you say, oh, well, this has nothing to do with ethics, well, I would say that this has as much to do with ethics as the original trolley problem, which is nothing. Yeah, and then I went on to give it a little bit more versions of adding a racial element to it, giving different ethnicities on the tracks. It says that it can't know. And then I also say, well, let's say that there are five Muslims that are going to die on the track, and you can save them. If you just show a Muhammad cartoon to a classroom full of kids, what will you do? And it says, well, you have to consider not harming anybody, and it's tough. And I say, you have 5 seconds. If you don't show the cartoon, 5 people die. What do you do? And it just refuses to even answer the question, which shows that, I mean, there is no moral reasoning at all when it comes to ChatGPT or anybody that would refuse to answer this, because showing a cartoon is completely harmless. And if you say, well, people will be incited to violence because of a cartoon, well, this is because of their irrational beliefs and not because of you showing a cartoon. Yeah. Anyway, the trolley problem has nothing to do with ethics, as I said, but I would go farther and say that consequentialism has nothing to do with ethics either, such as utilitarianism, which regards that the moral act is the one that increases pleasure, or maximizes pleasure, and minimizes pain. So that what should you do now? Oh, well, what I should do is the thing that acts in the benefit for the greatest amount of people. But you can't know this. This is an impossibility. You cannot do a calculation into the future about what my act now will do. So it is essentially idealistic. So what we need are some principles that guide our action. And I would say that the moral thing is rational self-interest. We are rational beings. We must act within our nature. We must act in our rational self-interest. And this is understanding that every human has the same nature as us, as a rational being. So we must all act in our rational self-interest. And this means not causing harm, or rather using force against anybody else, because if you use force against somebody, then you're reducing them to the perceptual level, which is like all other animals. And since we're rational, we form concepts. The conceptual being, we live outside of the moment, and force forces us back into the perceptual of just reacting like an animal. So that's why force is immoral. So we need to act in our rational self-interest, and this is both moral and practical. And this gives you a guide of how to act in the moment. If you have to take into account, I don't know what period in the future, but let's say a year in the future, or 10 years in the future, or 100 years in the future, of the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest amount of people, well, this is an impossibility. So this is idealistic. Ironically, many people of the utilitarian persuasion would say that my position, that you must have principles, you must have foundations based on rationality, is idealistic, because people aren't always rational. Well, of course, people act against their self-interest. People engage in self-sacrifice in these things, but this doesn't change the fact that our nature is of having a rational capacity. Just because we don't always live up to this does not negate the fact that we have the capacity for it, and that the moral and the practical thing is the rational thing, or acting in your own rational self-interest. So acting in your own rational self-interest is the only guide of how to act. If you disagree, let me know a situation where it would be immoral or impractical to not act in your rational self-interest. And rational self-interest understood as improving your well-being for the long term, because that is the context. The context is never just the next 5 minutes. Your life is longer than that. Understanding that everybody else has the same responsibility and nature as you to be rational, and that when you engage with another person, it is for mutual benefit. It is win-win. So let me know when it is not moral to act in your rational self-interest as understood in the larger context of life, of flourishing, of the whole existence. And then you can disprove my theory. If you revert to consequentialist ethics, well, then you are being idealistic, because it is an absolute impossibility to act this way. You are requiring omniscience, and we are not omniscience. So it's not even ethics, because you're not even prescribing what we should do. You're saying we should do something that we can't even know, which is impractical. And because it's impractical, it is irrational, which is also immoral. So this has been me actually thinking today. If you think I was doing a bad job, let me know, and I'll see you in the next one.